today is a great day to thank God for what he's given us through our mothers. I mean, I'll be quite honest with you, especially on Sunday mornings. Sometimes I don't know how y'all do everything that y'all do. I mean, one of the greatest things that our moms do, it seems like, and it was like at my house when I was growing up, and it's still that way with Katie, as they know where everything is. You ever know that, moms? We have a saying at our house that it's not lost until mom can't find it. And I can't tell you how many times that she's either looked at the kids or she's looked at me when we've said we can't find something and said, are you looking at it? Are you looking for it like you look for it or like I look for it? And so because if we don't do it like she does it, we won't find it. And even so, life can be overwhelming for moms. I mean, you can feel like you're in the worst position ever. I had a mom last week. I was putting together the band slideshow for the seniors at Mel High, and one of the moms, the day of the banquet, sends me like a pile of pictures in the morning of the banquet. The video's already done, it's away and everything, and she's just like, I'm so sorry, I didn't see it, there's too many emails and all that, and I could just feel her overwhelmedness, in the emails she sent, and it's easy to get behind, and it can feel like every mistake and every missed deadline is just making it worse, and it feels tough because you only get one shot to raise your kid. And when you miss something or you're about to miss something, it just feels like it's the worst thing ever. I think about how moms keep things all together. I listen to my wife bounce from reining in a local politician on an issue to dealing with an HR thing, to studying for her life group in Revelations of all things, which is difficult as it is, to dealing with, to handling a pesky doctor's office billing department who didn't code something the right way. I'm then around to someone who needed a shirt this afternoon but didn't tell her, and she's got trying to wash it and dry it before, mid-afternoon. I mean, that was not me. Maybe it was. I don't know. But anyway, I'm just like, will you guys leave me alone till I finish spreading my peanut butter? Stop. I can't handle it all. Wait. I'm watching the water boil. It's okay. I can see how moms can feel like a hot mess sometimes. I really, really, really do. I mean, and I want to talk this morning about a woman who really did feel like she was a hot mess. She really, really did. And, but she ended up having it more together than she ever thought. And she affected the lives of billions of people. And you may know her name, you may not. If you've been around church much, you probably do. But if you haven't been around church much, this is going to be new for you. It says it's a story from the Old Testament. It's the origin story of the Old Testament prophet Samuel. And that's the story. The story has a lot of awesome truth for everyone. And it may be Mother's Day, and yes, it's a Mother's Day focus, but this is not only about mothers today. I think you're going to see that as we talk about it. This story is about all of your life, whether you're single, you're a parent, you're married or not, whatever. And it starts, honestly, with Samuel's dad, Elkanah. And his mom, Hannah. And in 1 Samuel 1, so if you want, you can turn there in your Bibles if you want to. You can follow along with my notes on your smart device. You go to baywestchurch.com/notes, or if you got the little brown Bible app there that, YouVersion Bible, you can go in there and click on events and type in Bay West Church, and my notes will be there. You can follow along. Verses will be on the screen by our wonderful team that's just kicking butt doing that. And so we'll start at verse 2. So we talked about Elkanah. He had two wives. One was called Hannah and the other Peninnah. And Peninnah had children, but Hannah had none. So I think, so you're going to know right off the bat, this is an issue. We got two wives in the same home, and one has children, one does not. And you're going to know that's the issue, that part of the story, because the author put it right at the beginning, And I think this could be a sore subject these days in our culture. In our culture, there's a shift from, it seems like there's an extreme group of people. There's some people say on one side, I don't ever have kids, they just slow me down, and on the other side, like, kids are the greatest thing ever. And sometimes they get at war. I mean, I see a lot on social media back and forth. You can see a lot. People are back and forth. There's so many extremes. But the reality is this: whenever a child is involved, that is a blessing from God. That's a blessing from God, even if it doesn't feel like it in the moment, I mean, he started that life. God started that life. And so in all things, we should really be thankful, whether it seems hard or not. We talked about all things work together for my good. This is very, very true. So whatever situation you're in, God can work through it. Verse 3 said this. So year after year, this man went up from his town to worship and sacrifice to the Lord Almighty at Shiloh, where Hophni and Phinehas, the two sons of Eli, were priests of the Lord. And whenever the day came for Elkanah to sacrifice, he would give portions of meat to his wife Peninnah and to all her sons and daughters. But to Hannah he gave a double portion because he loved her, and the Lord had closed her womb. So she was in a situation where she couldn't have kids, at least as far as they knew. And everyone, I always looked at that and goes, well, what about the multiple wives, in the Old Testament? Everybody wonders about that. And there's even, honestly, there's a push in some fringes of our society to return things like that. And I've even seen a pastor actually go online and talk about supporting having multiple wives. That's insane. If anybody ever tries to tell you that and tries to, let me show you in the Bible where it says it, just, you can look at it and tell them where they're wrong, or you can walk away any way you want, but you don't need to listen to that at all. Because I'm going to tell you a few things to remember. One, when God made man and woman, he made Adam and Eve. He didn't make Adam and Eve and Laurie and Janet and all. That's not how it worked. God doesn't command it anywhere. He may have tolerated it and worked through it like he does all of our sin. When God talks about leaders, he actually warns against that specifically in some cases. And I will tell you the truth. It always caused more problems just about everywhere it's mentioned. There's always something to go there. And we're going to see it's causing problems here. In verse 6, it says, because the Lord had closed Hannah's womb, her rival, that's Elkanah. I mean, when you talk about Peninnah, her rival kept provoking her in order to irritate her. In verse 7, this went on year after year, and whenever Hannah went up to the house of the Lord, her rival provoked her till she wept and would not eat. So this is causing all kind of conflict. And interestingly enough, the villain in this story, per se, when you think about it, is actually someone who is insensitive to someone who was unable to have kids. Think about it, okay? Carry that with you. Elkanah is kind of beside himself. He doesn't really know what to do. He's kind of like, well, don't I mean more to you than 10 sons? Clueless dad's trying, but it's just not working. She's like, she's probably thinking, you're more trouble than 10 boys and 10 kids. But anyway, I mean, here's the thing. The thing to realize is there is a satisfaction in a relationship that doesn't come from a peer relationship, but from someone you can mentor. God's created us specifically that way for the propagation of our species, but also for the transmission of the gospel. See how he worked that all together? And how we're coded to do that, and also how that works into sharing the gospel. And that's not just moms, but that's dads and uncles and cousins and teachers and family friends as well. But often moms, because they have, I believe, possibly because they have a special physical connection to giving birth to kids, specifically, it's kind of coded into their DNA a little bit. That's general. That's not every person. You might have a guy who is just much more motherly than a mom somewhere, or much more interested in taking care of that. Might happen. I don't see it very often, but it's possible to happen. But that's a general thing. God created it this way to help others know and understand how he loves us. Do you realize that? He made it like that for a reason. And in Isaiah 66:13, God likens the way that he comforts people to how a mother comforts her child. And it doesn't matter if you can physically have kids or not. I mean, you see this in Exodus 2. When Moses was found by the Egyptian princess, he wasn't her child, but her heart went out to him. And she raised him as her own. So this was a big deal with Hannah, and Peninnah was making it worse. So one day after they finished eating, they're at the temple to worship, and Hannah got up from the table and she began to pray to the Lord. I mean, she's weeping bitterly. I mean, this is not a sniff. This is ugly cry territory. This is just the top ugly cry you can have. And she said in verse 11, she said, and she made a vow saying, Lord Almighty, If you will only look on your servant's misery and remember me and not forget your servant, but give her a son, then I will give him to the Lord all the days of his life, and no razor will ever be used on his head. So here she prays to the Lord, and she says, God, if you just give me a son, I will give him back to you. And what she means by no razor will ever be used on his head is that meant that she was going to dedicate him specifically to the Lord's service. He was going to be all in on that. In verse 12, she said, and she kept on praying. You think it's going to get better, but maybe not. She kept on praying to God, to the Lord, and Eli, the priest, right, he observed her mouth. And Hannah was praying in her heart, and her lips were moving, and her voice was not heard. So Eli thought she was drunk. And he said to her, how long are you going to stay drunk? Put away your wine. You know, it's like she's praying. Imagine this. She's praying. She's sad. She's in a rough place. She's been doing an ugly cry. And then she's just there and her lips are moving, this complete emotional release kind of thing. And then the preacher comes up and says she's drunk. Hey, Velma, get off the sauce. You know, put down your Thunderbird. You know, that's terrible. You know, guys, we can be really insensitive sometimes, and that's what happens. And she's got to be, what's going on? You know, Penina is on me. Elkanah doesn't understand. You know, she cries out to the Lord, and at the moment she's like, are you listening to me? And then the preacher thinks I'm drunk. I mean, this is the worst. This is so bad for her at this point. And she tells him, she says, no, I'm crying out from my heart. I'm really sad and I'm anguished. And Eli tells her, go in peace. And I hope that God listens to you. He's probably feeling like a complete jerk right now, but to Hannah's credit, she let him off the hook. You know, she recognized, she went on. So she goes and she gets something to eat and she feels better. See, there is comfort food in the Bible. You know, sometimes when you eat, you feel better. You know, it may have been chocolate. I don't know. But then she goes and she goes home. They all go back to home and God hears her prayer. And immediately she gets pregnant. And then has a child 9 months later. In verse 20, it says this. She named him Samuel because I asked the Lord for him. Samuel actually means God has heard. So every time you see her talk to her son, that will be a reminder to her that God listened. God is there. God heard me. And she went to her husband and told him about her vow and what her intentions were. And she said in verse 22, she said to her husband, after the boy is weaned, I will take him and present him before the Lord, and he will live there always. And the husband, to his credit, he agreed with her. And he told her to wait until the boy was weaned off the milk, then take him. And when he was, they took him and an animal to make sacrifice, and they made a sacrifice to the Lord. Then she takes the boy back to the priest Eli, and the same one that thought she was drunk. And she tells him this in verse 27, I prayed for this child, and the Lord has granted me what I asked for. So now I give him to the Lord, for his whole life will be given over to the Lord. And he worshiped the Lord there. And I want you to understand something. Hannah went from a hot mess in the very beginning of this, but I want you to understand that she understood something that guided everything she did, and that led her out of that territory, and it really made all the difference. And I want to say she made a lot of difference in this. So how did Hannah make a difference? And this is something that I think we all need to understand. The first thing she did was she realized the power of the Lord. She realized, I can't fix this situation. Her husband, her family couldn't make any difference. You know, she went and got in a fist fight with Elkanah, maybe for a minute, but I still think she would have been going at her. I mean, creating a more powerful position, getting a better job, having more money, a better education, those would not solve the problem. She didn't complain to everybody. She didn't write her congressman or become bitter and angry and distance herself from God like so many people do when things aren't going well. She pressed closer to God. She opened up more emotionally to God. She was listening to God and beseeching him and coming closer and closer and closer to him. Have you ever prayed for something for so long and it just doesn't seem like it's working out? And you're like, you get to a point and you're like, Lord, I don't really care what you do. Just fix it. However you're going to do it. And it doesn't seem like he's doing anything, and yet she's continuing to come back and come back and come back and come back and come back again. So she realized the power of God. And then she reacted to that reality. And she went to God for help, and he heard her. And the reality was this is a reality for each and every one of us. And it is this: only God can truly help whatever situation you're in the middle of. That's really it. We can do a lot of things to maybe alleviate things, and we can take guesses and sometimes get lucky, but ultimately, I love what it says in Psalm 121, 1 and 2. It says, I look up to the mountains. Does my help come from there? And the inference is no. My help comes from the Lord who made heaven and earth. And we read that, and people stitch that on pillows and stuff like that, or they make graphics out of it and memes and stuff, and they share it online. But I don't think we really grasp the full weight of what he's saying there. The reality is all my help that is really help comes from the Lord, even if it may come from someone else, even if it may come from an idea that came into me, came into my brain, or something I thought to do. It all comes from the Lord, because the Lord ultimately is the source of all that. God, it may come from someone else, but God created them. God created their life path. God gave them the experiences. God moved them at that moment to say that. God can even use those who don't follow him to accomplish his will. It can be done. So if there is help that comes, it's going to come from the Lord. And when she found that reality, she remained true to that reality. See, and it changed her life. And honestly, it changed the life of generations of people to follow you. When I say it affected billions. Samuel had a dramatic effect as a messenger of God in the Bible. And there's millions and billions of people have read what God told him to say and watched his life and what happened with him and have been blessed and know God more. She never got a degree. She never held a position. She never ran a corporation. She never had a career. But she understood one principle that made all the difference, not just in her life, but we find out in the next chapter that God blessed her with even more children, but also even in the life of Samuel as well. Matthew 24:13 tells us that the one who perseveres to the end will be saved. She remained true. Hannah understood this really one thing, that the one thing that can change everything is the only thing that fixes anything. And I'm going to tell you, if you have a problem or a situation in your life, and you're not putting God first in that situation, I'm just going to say it, you don't care to have it fixed. You really don't. You're just making activity to try to make yourself feel better. And we see people like this. And you people try to give advice about things and help them with things, and they're just doing stuff. I'm just doing stuff, and I'm saying I'm doing it to help my situation, but you're like, you don't need to do that. Here's the big elephant in the room thing you need to do, right? We've all been there in different loads of problems. It's not just a spiritual situation. But here's the one thing you need to do with your life right here. Here it is. And they try to do, oh no, I'm not going to do that because that's too hard. I'm going to try to do this. And I'm going to put a lot of energy into it. And then I'm going to complain that God didn't fix my problem. I'm going to complain that that person didn't get better. I'm going to complain that the boss didn't give me enough hours, the boss didn't give me enough money, or this didn't happen, or that didn't happen. I'm going to complain about it. I'm going to put all this energy into all these other things, and God's saying, I need you right here. And we ignore that, because the truth is the one thing that can change everything is the only thing that fixes anything. And when you put God first in your life, and you seek God as the power and the reality of change in your life, and you remain true to that, and you stay faithful to the end, that's the only time anything ever truly gets fixed. I'm going to tell you the worst thing that God can allow to happen in your life. I'm going to say, it's not the worst. It's not a good thing. It's when you try to fix something and your problem seems to get a little bit better. And you think, okay, I got it. All that means is at some point that's going to fall off a hill. It's going to roll off a hill. It's going to get way worse later. And all that's doing is setting you up for a bigger problem when you ignore the Lord and you decide you're on your things. It's because and the thing you have to understand, Samuel was not just any old prophet, but he became the leading prophet in the nation of Israel at that time. And not only was he the most important prophet throughout his life, he was one of the most influential and important prophets in the history of Israel and throughout the Bible. Of the things that he did, he was the prophet that anointed a young king by the name of David. David was the most important king in the history of Israel. He was the father of Solomon, who was the richest, smartest, and wisest man on the earth, really, that possibly ever lived outside of Jesus. And David was the only one that taught David was the one that taught Solomon the importance of wisdom, which is what Solomon is known for. Not only was David the father of Solomon, but the most famous descendant in his family line was Jesus, who was the Savior of the world. Because even though Hannah didn't exactly know, she knew that there was one truth and one truth only that could change everything. And by being consistent, with herself and her family, she had a part in changing the life of everyone around her for generations to come. And I'm going to tell you that Samuel's life might not have been the way it was if God didn't make it hard for her to have children. If she wasn't in a situation where the other wife was sitting there, just trying to make her feel like just a complete failure for not having children, we don't know if she would have called out to the Lord the way it was. All those years of suffering put her in a position that she was ready to give this child up to the service of the Lord. And when she did, God magnified her legacy exponentially in ways that she could possibly not understand. I listened to an interview one time with Cheryl Batchelder, and at the time she was the CEO of Popeye's Louisiana Chicken. When she was hired, Popeyes had gone through 4 CEOs in like 7 years, and the organization and the franchises were struggling, and she led Popeyes to rebrand into Popeyes Louisiana Kitchen, sorry. It's that now, and she actually, for the next 10 years, she led the growth of that organization, and it grew every year. In fact, the sales rose over that period of time 45%. And profit more than doubled until the organization was sold in 2017. Now she's the director of U.S. Foods. She's a Christian and she's a mom. And she said something that I wrote down that really brings out the essence of, I believe, what Hannah was about. And she said this. She said, the one primary job you have as a parent is to get your children into a relationship with Jesus, period, the end. It doesn't matter if they leave wet towels on the floor. When it's their house, they'll pick them up. I'm going to expand on that. It doesn't matter if they have straight A's in school. You want them to do their best. But the most important thing is you get them to Jesus, because if they get to Jesus, they're going to treat school like they're honoring the Lord. You want them to work hard. You want them to be successful. You want them to handle their finances well. If they're following Jesus, they're going to try to handle their finances the way that Jesus would, and the Bible gives us the greatest wisdom ever about handling finances. If you want them to have good friends and to be honorable people, look at what God has said throughout His Word about how to live and be honorable. Then you want to get them to Jesus so that they see their life and the way that they deal with relationships and the way that they deal with their careers and the way that they deal with friends and the way they deal with their responsibilities and their community in a way that would honor Jesus. And they see that as the most important thing. That's the most important thing. The number one thing you have to do is that. Now, does that mean that you can make them do it? No, it does not. But you need to do everything you can. Everything you can to show them that. What she's saying is the same thing that Hannah lived out. Basically, Hannah was, before she ever had Samuel, was saying, God, if you give him to me, if there is one thing I am going to influence him to be, one thing, the most important thing is that it's going to be to follow you all his days. And she used her influence in his life so that he would follow him. That's an example. That's living it out herself. That's faithful to the Lord's commandments. That's supporting them in this endeavor. There's them in an endeavor that's letting them go at the proper time. All of these things. And here's the thing, it's not just a statement about parenting, because the one thing that can change everything is the only thing that changes anything. Is something that we need to understand, not just in parenting, but in every relationship in our lives. In every decision, every problem. That's the one thing that can change it. And often when we say that, we think, oh, well, that's for them. That's for them, but that's got to mean it for you too. The one thing that can change everything is the only thing that changes anything. Imagine how that would affect your children. The toughest thing is that Hannah wasn't worried about him getting a job or getting straight A's, but realized that if someone follows Jesus, Jesus was going to take care of the grades. Jesus is the great equalizer. He provides direction that a professor can't see. And what if we moved past that in raising our kids? Why do you think we do Kids Zone every week? Why do you think we do that? Every week that you and I are here, we have people that volunteer in our Kids Zone so that they can mentor our kids to help them know Jesus better. We're trying to support parents in doing that, because that is a value here. And there have been times we've had very few kids, time we've had a lot of kids, but our value is still the same. And that is our responsibility as a church. When we come together as a family, as a church, our responsibility is to have each and every one of us lift each other up toward Christ. And that includes our kids. I think that's extremely important with our kids because they're just learning. It's extremely important that we're part of that. Our leaders are amazing. We have Lois and cadets this morning are back there teaching our children. And we should be thankful for them. They get it. This is a ready-made opportunity every week to mentor someone and change the lives of people that will long outlive you, and it's right in front of you. And so often we just turn our backs on it and let it run. We don't see it. There's people all around you, everywhere you are, in the situations that you're in the places that you are, that you have a chance to change their lives. And I'm not saying that every one of those where you just grab them and you pull that Bible out and thump them on the head and tell them about the gospel. You live the gospel, and if you get the chance, you share the gospel. Don't be afraid of it. Don't do it in spite of, but you have the opportunity to do that. Your one primary job as a grandfather is to get your grandchildren to love Jesus, to let them get closer to Jesus. Because the one thing that can change everything is the only thing that changes anything. The one primary job you have as a friend, the one primary job you have as a boss, it's not to get the numbers up. It's to how do I influence everyone around me to be better people, hopefully closer to Jesus. Because that's going to be it. The one primary job is a teacher. Primary job is an uncle. Primary job is an aunt. Primary job is a neighbor. And God created us that way. Think about the generational effect it would have on your family. You want to make an effect, you want to change the course of something that's not been going well, start there. You want to have a transformational effect on your community, start here. You want to have a historic effect on your nation? Go vote. But don't go fuss with somebody on Facebook about it. Don't go Twitter it to death and X-post it. Believe me, I know. It's so hard not to. And there may be times you need to say something, but you want to make the most impact, make it with the one person and the people around you by living out who Jesus is. When you think about what would the world look like tomorrow, or in a decade, or in a generation or two, if we just started now and forgot what's been done before and started right now living as though this was our one and only task to help people get closer to Jesus. My life should reflect it. I should tell you how to get there. You the same with everyone you know. If we realized that, and we realized where the power was, we reacted like that is the power, and we went toward that, and then we remained true in it. Imagine what God would do to our world. It'll be a whole lot more effective than who gets to be president. It'll be a whole lot more effective than what you have in your 401k. It'll be a whole lot more effective about how many promotions you got at work, and how many friends you have, and how many folks you follow on social media, and on all this type of stuff. All of these deals. More effective is getting people as close to Christ as you can, and that's the message that I have. I'm so thankful that my mom did that. My mom served in church. My mom read the Bible. My mom prayed for me. She showed me how it was to be done over and over and over and over again. And I didn't take her wisdom sometimes. And I know that had to be frustrating for her, but she didn't sit there and wag the finger at me all the time. She recognized what I needed, and she did. And I was so thankful for what she had become, because you can thrive as a mom. This is the key. Your relationship with Jesus, helping others become closer to Jesus, that is the one thing we need to worry the most about, because it takes care of everything. Let's pray.